Welcome to the Baseball Nation show on SB Nation's YouTube channel. I am Grant Brisbee.
I'm Rob Nyer.
And we have a lot to talk about on this show. We've got the real referees coming back. We've got the NHL lockout. But we're going to start with the AL MVP race. We're going to be the first to hit this story. It's between Miguel Cabrera and Mike Trout. And it seems like there's a clear kind of demarcation line. There's the old school on one side and the new school on the other side, which is weird because the new school is all about speed and defense all of a sudden. But where do you fall, Rob? Are you old school or are you new school?
Are you kidding? I'm old school, Grant. I mean, if I weren't, I wouldn't be speaking to you on this lovely computer TV monitor screen thing. So yeah, I'm all over this Cabrera thing. He is clearly not. I can only take that so far. Look, I wrote about this morning. You've written about the Triple Crown. It's an incredible accomplishment. First time in 45 years, as we all know. I don't remember seeing a Triple Crown. Most fans don't. It's almost this mythic creature, like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot, that maybe someday, if we really worked hard, we might just get a little glimpse of. But we actually got to see one this season, and I couldn't have been more thrilled about it. But it doesn't make a player the MVP automatically any more than 60 home runs would or should. And in fact, we've had Triple Crown winners in the past, the distant past, who weren't the MVP. Ted Williams being maybe the best example. So, I mean, I could go on and on for literally an hour on this stuff. But I'll turn it over to you. But I think the MVP should be the guy who was the most valuable, meant the most to his club. And I'm not even sure if Miguel Cabrera would be second on my ballot this season.
Yeah. All right. So if Jose Bautista stayed healthy and hit 50 home runs, somehow that means that Miguel Cabrera is not the MVP. That's the part I don't get. It has to do with what players didn't do. If Mike, well, I guess Mike Trout's his direct competition, but if someone else bested him in the RBI or the home run category, all of a sudden that makes Miguel Cabrera less valuable. I don't understand that argument. I don't understand the argument that his team won the division when the Angels won more games and they didn't get to play the Royals or the Twins nearly as much. All these arguments I don't get. But I will say that if Miguel Cabrera wins it, I'm not going to be upset. I'm not going to be, pissed off that Miguel Cabrera and this is some travesty of justice, because it's what he's doing is unique. It's circumstances. It's being on the right team at the right time, collecting all these counting stats, being in the position that he is just kind of this combination of talent and luck and circumstance. And that's what baseball is. I mean, that's why I watch baseball. Everything's a combination of talent and luck and circumstance.
Right,
and
but I will be disappointed. Because I think for every 2 steps we take forward in analysis and, I don't know, just being smarter about the game, we take 1 step back. And I think that giving it to Cabrera, who in my mind clearly wasn't as useful to the Tigers as Mike Trout was to the Angels, whose team won more games, by the way. I think we take a step backward. And it just seems a shame to me when people just look at one thing and they feel like the voters have to reward this guy for doing something great, as opposed to looking at what the award, in my mind, should mean, which is who was the best player, who meant the most to his team. And Mike Trout, even missing a month of the season, was the most valuable player, added the most wins to his team, and it wasn't even really close.
Yeah, I think the most amusing part to me is that all of a sudden the new school is about speed and defense. And when I first started getting into the stat-oriented side of baseball, you were looking for these big hulking sluggers, stick them at first. Who cares if they could run? It's funny seeing the sea change that's happened, and now you recognize that a good center fielder who steals bases at a ridiculous rate, the kind of value that has over a third baseman who is competent at best. But
what we didn't have when you got into it, or when I got into it, we didn't have good ways to measure base running and defense. We just sort of had to guess. Now we have all these methods to measure those things, and so of course, what the new school cares about are things that one can measure to a large degree, and we can measure more things than we ever could before, and so we care about those things as well.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, I think you and I are both for Trout. I think it's going to be Cabrera. I think he's got it pretty much locked up. I don't think there's going to be too much of a debate, but we'll see. We'll see.
Well, and I got to give you credit too, because more than a month ago, you floated the idea that Cabrera might actually be the MVP if the right things happened. And I thought they were impossible, and they did happen, and you were right.
Yeah, Triple Crown's, I think, just an automatic MVP. I don't think that's ever going to change from here on out. I don't know. It's probably a little bit big to tackle in the time we have. So we'll move on to the NL MVP, which is far less contentious, I think. I think there's a lot of good candidates, but I think Buster Posey holds more of the tiebreakers than, say, Ryan Braun or Andrew McCutchen. Is that kind of your take on it?
I think Posey is going to win. I think you're right. He had a great second half. His wins above replacement, not that a lot of voters pay that much attention to it, but the fact that he won the batting title, that is going to play really well with the voters. The fact that he played for a team that came on strong in the second half and finished in first place by a lot, that's going to come on. That's going to play really well. McCutchen and Braun, the two best candidates, probably finished second and third, maybe not in that order. But the fact that their teams didn't make the playoffs is really going to hurt them compared to Posey.
Yeah, I think that's the exact calculus. Posey's team is in the postseason. That's the end of the conversation. I think you've got, when you're looking at sabermetric stats, when you're looking at traditional stats, they're all really close. Posey doesn't have the home runs or the RBI that Ryan Braun does, but when you factor in that he's a catcher, even old school people know to do that. You look at a catcher a little bit differently than a left fielder. They're all really, really, really close. Especially when you account for WAR being a little funky for catchers. And then, okay, so you've got them all close. What's the tiebreaker? I'm not a big fan of I'm going to vote for only people who are in the playoffs. But as a tiebreaker, you could do worse. So I don't think it's going to be much of a competition. I don't think it's going to be unanimous. But I think Posey's got it pretty locked up, and it's the vote that I would do.
Yeah, I think that Posey is going to win for all the reasons that you cited. I think one reason I would vote for him, although the voters probably won't pay much attention, is he did all that half of his hitting in what played as a great pitcher's park this year, which is one of the things that makes his wins above replacement look so good compared to the other guys. I mean, he's basically at the top of any list you're going to find, or at least close. So to me, he's the clear choice, and the voters are going to love that batting average.
Yeah, I mean, the park's going to play into it. Everything's going to play into it. It's also going to play into it that last year, the Giants didn't make the playoffs. Why? Well, Posey's hurt. So you have that kind of clean narrative that with Posey, the Giants are a playoff team, a World Series. And then without Posey, they don't even make the playoffs. That's oversimplifying it by half. But it's this kind of clear line in the sand.
Also, before the season, there was speculation he would play 100, 110 games.
Oh, yeah,
that's what I was expecting. He played a lot more than that, and he's going to get some credit for that.
Yeah, no, I was expecting that. I was expecting 100 games, maybe throw in a couple dozen at first base, bring up to 120. I'm amazed that he played as much as he did and got even stronger in the second half when he was supposed to be tired, rested more. Everything about his season's been amazing. So he's the clear winner of the NL MVP. He's the winner of my heart. Buster Posey, I think he's good. But we're going to move on to AL Cy Young. This is probably there's going to be a little bit of debate between David Price and Jered Weaver. I think you might get some sabermetric chatter for Justin Verlander. Maybe Felix Hernandez pops in there. I doubt it. But I think David Price has it. What do you think? Do you think there's a leader in this race?
I do not. Well, there might be one. I don't know who it is. I will disagree with you, though. I don't think that Weaver is the top challenger to Price. I think it's Verlander. He finished strong. He pitched for a playoff team, which historically has made a difference. He led the American League in innings. He led the American League in strikeouts. Yes, Weaver went 20-5, but with 50 fewer innings than Verlander and a higher ERA. Now, I think he'll do well, top 5, sure. But to me, it's probably Price at 20-5 and a lower ERA than Weaver. versus Verlander, whose ERA is about the same, but who has 27 more innings, 34 more strikeouts, and the great finish for a postseason team. So I think it's going to be really close between those two guys. I'm not sure who's going to win, but to me, it's Price Verlander. And I'm kind of hoping that Fernando Rodney sneaks in just to throw a reliever into the mix, but he had such an amazing season. But I do think it's Price Verlander. If I have to, just based right now on what I've heard, because this often comes down to momentum. And I feel like Verlander picked up a lot of momentum in the last couple of weeks.
I think you could be right. I think the one thing that I think you and I might like to look at are innings pitched. You know, if you've got 20 more innings than Jered Weaver, he's almost got 50 more innings than Jered Weaver. I think that's going to make a huge difference to you and I. I'm not sure if it's going to make a huge difference to the voters. I think they're going to look at 20 wins. I think they're going to look at the ERA. And if you've got a guy like Jered Weaver with a comparable ERA to Justin Verlander, maybe Verlander has the strikeouts, but Weaver has the 20 wins. Seems archaic, but I think that's going to maybe boost him a little bit more than Verlander's innings. The one thing that I think a lot of people are forgetting is that Angels Stadium and Tropicana are pretty good pitcher's park. I mean, Angels Stadium was a real strong pitcher's park this year. Tropicana Field usually is, and Comerica's not. So I think people are forgetting that. So I would vote for Verlander. I don't think he's going to win. I think Price takes it. I think you get 20 wins, you lead the league in ERA. It's like the Triple Crown. You do both those things, you're probably going to take it.
Well, I think you're probably right. The two biggest components in the voters' minds are wins, ERA. Price has Verlander in both of those categories. So he probably does win the award. But I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be really close. Verlander will get extra credit for the strikeouts and for pitching for a postseason team. I think it'll be really interesting. It won't be like last year where it's obvious who's going to win and unanimous or near unanimous. I think it's going to be really close.
All right, we'll move on to the NL Cy Young. A lot of candidates. There isn't really one who's pulling away. We've got Dickey, we've got Clayton Kershaw, Gio Gonzalez, Johnny Cueto, Craig Kimbrel. I don't think anyone's pulling away. I think Dickey might be the favorite, but I think there is a surprisingly strong Craig Kimbrel faction that's going to get pretty noisy. How do you see it shaping out? Shape it up.
I don't know. Kimbrel's a fascinating candidate. I think he might actually lose some support because of Chris Medlin, who's also getting some attention for having an amazing season, although a wildly different sort of season. I guarantee you Medlin will get a vote or two at some position on the ballot because of what he's done, as will Kimbrel. But I just think there's not enough buzz. As great as Kimbrel's been, I don't think the buzz is quite there for him, and you need that buzz, especially in a crowded field of candidates. It's funny. 2 weeks ago, it looked like Clayton Kershaw might be done for the season. Instead, he came back and pitched really well in the last couple of weeks for the Dodgers. He's not going to win the award, even though he has the best ERA, even though he won it last year, because he's 14-9. But he will get some support and almost caught R.A. Dickey in the strikeout race. I still think it's Dickey's to lose at this point. He has the second most wins in the league. He has second lowest ERA. He leads the league in innings. He leads the league in strikeouts, and he's a great story. So I think he probably is the favorite by a nose over Gio Gonzalez and maybe Johnny Cueto.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Dickey has a slight advantage, but I still can't shake the idea that Kimbrel's going to run away with it, or not run away with it, but take it at the last second. I found on Reddit someone posted a screen capture of a Braves broadcast, and the heading is Cy Young worthy, and it's listing these stats, and they're ridiculous when you lump them all together. Okay, you've got 16 and a half strikeouts per 9 innings. That's the best in baseball history. You've got a 123 opponent average. That's the lowest since 1900. 356 opponent OPS. That's the lowest in the expansion era. He struck out half of the batters he faced. It's all ridiculous. They also put 113 strikeouts to 26 hits, the best ratio of all time. I don't know what that means.
Let me ask you again. I'm sorry, I missed it. Where did you see that? All those numbers?
It was on Reddit. It looks like it's a screen capture from the Braves broadcast or some Fox broadcast.
Right. Now let me let me try to get at why that's not going to matter. For an outside the lines candidate to really do well in award voting, it has to catch on with the bigger media, the guys who actually vote.
Right.
And that means basically Jason Stark runs it
Right.
in his column, or Peter Gammons or somebody. And I just don't think that those numbers were disseminated to the point where enough voters saw them before today, Thursday, when the voting has to be in.
Right. I think Stark was pushing a little bit. I think Stark was a Kimbrelite. So if he has pushed the narrative in the past. I think you've mentioned. So I don't know how much reach that has, but I can't shake the Kimbrel faction kind of sneaking up and taking it.
Well, if that happens, I will bow to your prognostication ability.
All right, we are going to move on to one-game playoffs. We have the Orioles at the Rangers. We have the Cardinals at the Braves. And we have to make predictions on this because this is really important. We know exactly what's going to happen in a single game. So we had better be right or we're going to look like complete fools. So Orioles, Rangers, make your prediction, and it had better be right.
Well, I think that by any reasonable lights, you have to like the Rangers. They played better this season than the Orioles on balance. They're playing at home, and Yu Darvish has been fantastic. I think over his last 11 starts, an ERA around 2 with a great strikeout-to-walk ratio. Now, sure, who knows? Maybe he caves to the pressure, but that could happen to the Orioles starter as well. So I like the Rangers. I mean, I know there's a tendency to sort of think that momentum is important, and maybe the Rangers are in a terrible place mentally, emotionally right now because of what just happened in Oakland. But I think the Rangers are still the better club, and they have the better pitching staff right now.
Do we even know who's starting for the Orioles yet? I saw it was to be announced this morning.
I have not seen that yet. And one of the things, of course, that Buck Showalter has done all season, but especially in the second half, is just mix and match with the starters, and he hasn't really had a set rotation. And that's to his credit, how well they played down the stretch. But the fact of the matter is, if Yu Darvish were an Oriole, he would be their ace.
Yeah, and I think Chen pitched fairly recently. I think he pitched in the last series. So I don't think it's going to be Chen who's their most reliable starter. Yeah, I mean, you have to favor the Rangers, but again, it's one game, and in a game, the Astros can beat the Nationals. So Rangers look stronger, but who knows? And I think we're going to be seeing that a lot throughout the playoffs while pretending that we do know. That kind of goes along with the territory. So we'll move along to Cardinals at Braves. You've got Kyle Loesch against Chris Medlin. We talked about Medlin a little bit first. I think Medlin is a really, really good guy to start that one-game playoff, and you factor in the home field advantage. Looks like the Braves are stronger there, too.
Yeah. Medlin, for anybody who hasn't been paying attention, has been phenomenal all season, but especially since going into the rotation in August. The Braves have won all 12 of his starts this season. They've won 23 straight games he started, going back to 2010, which is the all-time record as far as anybody can tell. Now, they're going to lose eventually when he's starting, but you don't want to bet on it.
Yeah, and Kyle Loesch has surprisingly been really, really good over the past 2 years. The way they use him is weird. They rarely let him go longer than 6 innings. They know something that we don't. They're a little reluctant to extend him too far past, not even 100 pitches. I mean, sometimes he's taken out with 90-plus pitches. So they're going to be relying a little bit more on their bullpen. They've got to plan whenever Loesch pitches. But yeah, Medlin is kind of a badass. And then when you get to the end of the game, you've got Craig Kimbrel, Cy Young favorite, ready to kind of mop it up, wrap it up, not mop it up. But I think the Braves are looking pretty strong when it comes to that one-game playoff. But again, who knows?
Yeah, you're right. We anything could happen in one game. That might get rocked in the first inning. It's possible, but basically you have to like the home teams in almost all these games. It'd be very difficult, especially when the teams can basically get the right pitchers in place. And all these teams basically are using their best pitchers in game one, or the only game in the case of the wild card rounds. And they're evenly matched, so you have to like the home team.
Yeah, and that's actually an underrated point for with the two wild card setup. I think I've been focusing on it. It's harder on the wild card, obviously, than it has been in the past, because now they've got to win this one-game playoff, and that puts them at a clear disadvantage. But there's that underrated thing where they don't get to set up the rotation the way they want to. They're not going to get Chris Medlin starting 2 games in a division series, possibly. So that's a big kind of disadvantage for the wild card, which is one of the reasons I like the new format. It makes it that much better to win the division. We are going to move on to our final part, which is picking World Series teams. Again, these have to be right. This is a clear measure of our acumen and baseball knowledge. So muster everything that you have and give us a World Series prediction, Rob.
Well, wait a second. First of all, before we get to that, as much fun as it's definitely going to be, I think we ought to at least give the readers. Well, are you reading? You people out there, you're reading. You read and then you come here. Give them a few little nuggets about the playoff teams. I want to start with your Giants, because I know you're too modest to rave about them. The Giants. What everybody knows about the Giants, they have great pitching, but they can't hit, right? That's how they won a World Series a couple years ago. Well, that is not these Giants. These Giants have good pitching, but they also have Tim Lincecum with his 5.18 ERA in the rotation. The bullpen isn't what it was. And here's my favorite postseason stat that I found so far anyway. The Giants are 6th in the National League in scoring, which is pretty good. Even granting some of that was Miguel Cabrera, a lot of it maybe. They're a lot better than that. The Giants are 1st in the National League this year in road scoring, 1st, by a lot. They're 56 runs ahead of the Nationals, who are number 2 in road scoring. That's incredible, it really is. It just goes to show you, A, they've been maybe a little lucky on the road, but also their home park has been incredibly pitcher-friendly this season. But they are a good hitting team. And I'm not saying they're my World Series pick, but they can hit, and they shouldn't be taken lightly. All right, your turn.
They can hit. Their pitching's a little shaky. I mean, it's not, you described them as good. They're a little shaky. Vogelsong looked great in his final start. That's a plus. Barry Zito's been okay over the last month or so. He's been pretty good, but you know what you're getting with Zito. Lincecum's been genuinely bad a lot of the season. Matt Cain's great. Madison Bumgarner has looked tired over the last quarter of the season. His control isn't as fine. He's admitted his mechanics are a little wonky. So you've got a real different Giants team than I'm used to. It's a funky setup. If they had the pitching they had in 2010, I would be thrilled. They would be my pick for the World Series. As is, it's a real funky constructed team. It's real different, and it kind of reminds me of the Reds. Everyone thinks of the Reds as this mashing team that gets by with Bronson Arroyo, just doing enough to win. But the Reds are there because of their starting pitching. Matt Latos and Cueto and Arroyo and Leake and Homer Bailey. I mean, they've had a real solid, consistent rotation. The offense isn't really doing that much. It is a team built on the rotation and their bullpen. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think they're real close to the league lead in ERA plus. When you adjust for ballpark, they've got a real amazing pitching first team. So that's kind of surprising too.
Yeah, and the Reds are 12th in the league in road scoring, way below average, while the other playoff teams are near the top. Just they're a long ways from the Giants, but the Nationals and the Cardinals and the Braves are basically all bunched up real close, close to the top. But you're right. I mean, the Reds are basically the anti-Giants, but just looking at the teams and their raw stats, you would never know that. Right.
And then you've got, let's see, in the American League, Yankees, after all the trials and tribulations, they're the number 1 seed. which no one probably would have predicted a couple of weeks ago. Everyone was wondering if they were going to slip out of the playoffs altogether. But they're the #1 seed. Texas is the second wild card, or first wild card, which is amazing. The A's, I think you might have heard a little bit about the A's sneaking into the playoffs. The Tigers are an interesting choice to kind of go Cardinals on the American League and sneak in there, because Tigers have a pretty strong team, and when you start Verlander, 2 starts in any series. Scherzer, if his shoulder is not tired, Scherzer's been great in the second half. I think, and then Fister, they're a surprisingly strong team, and I think they've got a real chance to surprise people.
Well, I would agree the Tigers could look really good, especially in that first playoff series when Verlander can pitch twice. But I just think that the Tigers, they finished 11th in the league in road scoring. Granted, Fielder's been really good lately, and of course Cabrera's Cabrera, but they're just not that good at hitting team, and didn't win as many games as the Angels, who aren't even in the playoffs. So I would say that they're something of a long shot in my mind to even reach the World Series, let alone win it.
All right, so you got predictions?
Predictions, absolutely. I'm going to say the A's are going to the World Series. Moneyball 2, as you wrote about so eloquently earlier today. They go to the World Series, and they face off. I wish I could say the Giants for your sake, and also because I'd love to see another Bay Bridge series. But I think it's going to be the A's against the Rangers. Is that even possible?
If there were a way for the Rangers to lose a third in a row, that would be interesting.
I would love to see that series. No, I think it's going to be the Angels against the Braves. I'm sorry, the A's. All right, the A's. This is my last and final pick. Ready? A's, yep. A's, Braves. World Series 2012 with the A's winning.
Yeah, I could see that. I am going to go. This is really important. This has got to be right. I'm going to go with the Tigers. I'm going to stick my neck out on that. I'm going to say their pitching carries them, like the White Sox in, 06. And I'm going to go with the Tigers against the Giants. Yeah, why not? I'm not biased. I say Tigers, Giants. And I say it's, I think it'd be funny to see A's Nationals. I think that would set up a real interesting narrative, because these two teams were trading back and forth and exchanging young players and veteran players. I think that would be kind of interesting to see them. But I'll go with Tigers, Giants. Completely unbiased.
A lot of tradition there. I like to see that. That would be a fun one.
Yeah.
Never happened before. Never been a Tigers-Giants World Series.
No, that'd be a pretty good old school series. Yeah, historical franchises. And I'm locking that in the stone, and that can't possibly be wrong. This is real hard-hitting factual stuff I'm presenting. That's going to do it for the Baseball Nation show for the season. We will be around in other capacities. We're gonna do some things with Google Hangouts and things like that. So you'll be seeing us. Don't fret. You'll be seeing our faces on your computer as much as you'll let us. And we will come back in the spring renewed and reinvigorated with a new Baseball Nation show. Until then, I'm Grant Brisbee.
I am Rob Nyer, and we will see you on the Google.
And after that, next year.